What are the different dynamics in music and how do you make a clear difference between loud and soft sounds? Where should crescendos, diminuendos start and end? And should you only play the exact markings on the score? Keep listening to learn more as dynamics play a big role in music. Hi, I'm Fiona from Learn Music Together and I help adults grow and develop their musical skills so they can play with confidence by sharing my Play Music Better methods, which focus on learning how to practice effectively. There are 5 categories of performance directions, and performance directions are markings on the score that a composer uses to indicate how they want the notes to be played, and dynamics is one of those categories. They are often seen as an afterthought by learners. In other words, something you think about once you've learned how to play the notes in time, and making clear contrasts is something that many find challenging. In this video, I'm going to run through what the different dynamic markings in music mean and how you should go about incorporating them into your daily practice. And make sure you stick around to the end of this video because as a bonus, I'll be sharing 3 tips that are fantastic if you want to improve your dynamics and take them to the next level so that you communicate more expression and musicality when you play. And lastly, while watching, make sure to let me know if you learn the notes of a piece first and then add the dynamics, and also what aspect of dynamics do you find the most challenging. It's always interesting to hear about the experience of others, and your comment may help and inspire someone else who's listening. So let's start with what are dynamics in music. For those not in the know, dynamics is the collective word used for performance directions that relate to how loud or softly you should play. There are 2 main dynamic markings, P, which is an abbreviation for piano and means to play softly, and F, which is short for forte, meaning to play loudly. In between these 2 dynamic markings, you also have MP and MF. The M stands for mezzo, which means moderately. So MP is mezzo piano or moderately soft, and MF is mezzo forte or moderately loud. Each dynamic marking gets slightly louder. So the softest one here is P, which means soft. Then we have mezzo piano, which is slightly louder, and then mezzo forte, MF, which is slightly louder again, and then F forte, which is the loudest dynamic on the screen right now. We can also extend the dynamic range by adding pianissimo and fortissimo. The suffix issimo means very. So when you see double P, it means to play very softly, and double F very loudly. You may also see more extreme dynamics in your music. Technically, any number of repeated letters is possible. As you can see here, Tchaikovsky uses 4 and 5 letter Ps in this piece. So you might be thinking, is that actually possible? The one thing to note about dynamic markings is that they are only relative to one another. So there is no specific level that determines what a marking such as 4 or 5 Ps means, other than 5 Ps should be softer than 4 Ps. So in this Tchaikovsky example, the loudest dynamic marking is piano. So you would probably need to make this louder than you would do normally so that you can achieve all the different shades of soft that Tchaikovsky wrote. The best way to practice a piece such as this one is to start with the softest bar and ascertain how soft can you play without compromising the quality of sound or tone that you're making. You would then need to grade the rest of the dynamics accordingly. There are also signs and words that indicate that you should change between dynamics. Crescendo, which is sometimes abbreviated to creche, or indicated by a sign that has 2 parallel lines that open outwards. This dynamic marking means to gradually get louder, and I want to emphasize the word gradual. You need to give careful thought to the musical context when you see this dynamic marking. It doesn't necessarily mean that you should get that much louder. It can mean a subtle change within a phrase. It's the same when you see a decrescendo sign or a diminuendo as it's sometimes called. If the music is to get gradually softer, you'll usually see a sign that looks like 2 lines that come together in the opposite direction of a crescendo, or you'll see the word dim. In most circumstances, the words decrescendo and diminuendo mean the same. However, there is some discussion amongst musical historians that believe that Schubert used the term diminuendo to indicate that the music should get gradually softer and slow down. However, for most people, when they're learning to play music, you can treat the words diminuendo and decrescendo the same. They both mean really to gradually get quieter or gradually get softer. Dynamics are like the equivalent of an artist's paint palette. By mixing paints, you can have almost an infinite amount of shades. Think of dynamics like choosing a new shade of paint. You may already have a colour in mind when you go to the DIY store, but it's never that straightforward. There's so many shades of the colour that you had in mind that are all similar but yet so different. If you're anything like me, you always have to try a few tester pots first before you commit to choosing the colour for the whole wall. And so often what you think will work when you get it home and put it on the wall, it's not quite the same colour as you perhaps thought it was when you were in the DIY store. And that's a little bit like when we're practicing dynamics. What we think we're doing and what's actually coming across when we play can be two different things. You want to make sure that you distinguish the different shades clearly when you play. So how do you achieve this? First, it's important to understand how you play loudly or softly on your instrument. What is the correct technique to use? How does it feel in the muscles, the fingers, the airflow? What are the potential problems with playing loud or soft sounds on your instrument? It isn't simply a matter of striking a key with more or less velocity or blowing faster or slower on a wind instrument. There's so much more to it. For example, lots of players tense the body without being aware when playing softly, which often compromises the sound. On piano, people often use more height in the hands to play loudly, or don't fully depress the keys when playing softly, both of which will compromise the tone and not give you the desired musical effect. One of the best ways to improve your dynamics is to work on it like a technical exercise. So here's an example of something that you could do regardless of what instrument you play. Start by playing a note so that no sound is produced and write down what you notice. What did you have to do to make that note have no sound in the tone production? Share with others in the comments below your findings when you try this. Now think about what you need to do to produce a very soft sound. Don't be afraid to experiment here and try different things. A quick tip: change only one thing at a time and make sure you write it down, whatever it is you changed, and what was the effect. So maybe on a wind instrument, you tried slowing the airstream down and the result, the sound was softer, but the tone was rather breathy. Next, you might try firming up the embouchure a little more or increasing the diaphragm pressure slightly. See this as a journey of exploration rather than searching for a specific result. If you do this for a couple of minutes at the start of each practice session, you'll soon start to notice what things work and what things don't. You can then progress to incorporating dynamics in your warm-up exercises and scales practice. I also recommend that you think about the dynamics in your music right from the get-go. They should never be an afterthought. As you learn the notes of a piece, notice what the dynamic markings are and start straight away practicing them at the correct level. Another tip that I want to share is to see dynamic markings on your score as a starting point or framework upon which you can build. In fact, many of the markings that you see on your music will be editorial and not ones that the composer wrote. Composers in the Baroque period would rarely indicate the dynamics on their music. It was instead left to the player. It was common practice in the Baroque time to vary the dynamics constantly, and terrace dynamics were often used by performers. Terrace dynamics are where you play a motive loudly and then softly when it's repeated. composers such as Mozart did write some dynamics on their music, but more detailed instructions didn't become the norm until the Romantic period. So don't be afraid to mix things up a bit and add some of your own dynamic contrasts. Musical phrases need shape to communicate the character or mood, and we can use subtle changes in the dynamics to achieve this. As a general rule, more volume intensifies the emotional power of the music. Melodies that ascend often grow in intensity, while descending phrases often offer repose. The harmony also drives the intensity of the music. As the music travels away from the tonic and primary chords, that's chords 1, 4 and 5, the power increases significantly. So again, you can adjust your volume accordingly, getting louder as you move away from the tonic and softer as the music returns back towards the tonic. So that you can understand this better, I'm going to play a short excerpt from a sonatina in C major by Gradual. It's from Opus 36 and it's number 20 in the collection. I'm going to play it first of all with only the dynamic markings that are written on the music, and then I'll play it with a few extra tonal shades that'll highlight the shape of the phrases and the harmonic movement. And now with a few additional tonal shades that highlight the phrases and the harmonic movement. As I said, don't be afraid to experiment and try different things. So often there is a tendency with learners to do only what it says on the music and no more. The score markings are a guideline, just as a tin of tomatoes is the base of a bolognese sauce. However, to elevate that bolognese sauce into something memorable, you have to add additional ingredients. It's the same in music. If you want to improve your understanding and execution of dynamics, I have 3 extra tips for you now. Number 1, play a piece that you know well, but use the opposite dynamics to what the music says. So if the music begins forte, you're going to begin piano. It's great fun and can often result in a much wider array of tonal shades being achieved. My second bonus tip is to record yourself playing your piece and be sure to communicate all the dynamic markings. Now, before you listen back to your recording, I'd love you to make a copy of your music and erase all of the dynamic markings. So once you've done that, listen back, and as you do so, write on the dynamics that you can hear on your music copy. Then do a comparison and see, did you miss any out? Were they what they should have been? Most people find that they're not quite what they thought they were, because whilst we think we're clearly distinguishing the contrast when we play, the reality is that they're not as clear as we intended. Dynamics are easily lost both in live and recorded performances. You often have to make a much bigger contrast than you think. This exercise of recording yourself and then listening back without those dynamic markings in front of you is really, really beneficial. It's one of the best tips that I can give you, and it really will help you realise whether or not you're making clear distinctions between your fortes, your pianos, and everything in between. My third bonus tip is acoustics can make a huge difference to how different dynamics in music sound. If you play an instrument that is portable, play your piece in different parts of your home. Ideally, find spaces that have completely different surfaces, such as your entrance porch, which may be tiled, or a room that has a wooden floor. I appreciate that this is more of a challenge if you play the piano or a keyboard, but you could look for different venues to practice in. Many churches have pianos, and you'll often see them at train stations in major city centres. Failing that, you could put something like a rug under your piano or lift the lid up. When you do this, you will notice slight differences in the acoustics. So those are my 3 bonus tips, and I'd love to hear how you get on in the comments below. So please do come back and share if you try out those 3 exercises. And if you would like further practice tips to elevate your playing, please download my free practice tips guide. Every one of these tips is helpful regardless of the level you are at, because so often it's the way you practice and what you do when you practice that makes a difference. You'll find the details of how to grab that guide in the description below. You'll also see a link to a playlist on the screen right now, which will take you to some more videos that will help you practice more effectively so that you can grow and develop your musical skills and play with confidence. Thanks for watching.